Hey guys, today I wanted to share with you about tomatoes. All things tomatoes and just some kind of experiences that I had last year. I wanted to go through the varieties that I'm going to be growing this year and just some different tips and tricks that I have learned and what I use staking wise, just to fertilize them. Different sizes of tomatoes, different meaty texture of tomatoes, just everything about tomatoes because I love tomatoes, and so I'm really excited. This week I will be starting all my seeds. I have a couple new varieties that I have actually never grown or never tasted, and so we're just going to go through this and we're going to talk about all things tomatoes. So here we go. Also, if you're new here, I'm Karen. This is the Yoder Homestead. Welcome. I appreciate your guys' support by watching our videos. And if you have not, go and subscribe so you get notifications when new videos come up. We are uploading every other day now. And we really try to connect with you guys if you comment in the videos below. And I try and link everything I can in the description box when it's possible. So, let's go. First thing, I'm going to go through and just share the varieties that I'm going to be growing this year. So the first thing about tomatoes is there's three different kinds of tomatoes. There's bush variety tomatoes, there are semi-determinate tomatoes, and then there's indeterminate tomatoes. And I'll explain what the difference is between those, but on these packets they say pole, so this one says pole tomato. This one says pole tomato, so this is an indeterminate type of tomato. And basically what that means is, and then also the difference on a different packet is this one is a bush variety of tomato. So the difference between that is a determinate tomato will produce all of its fruit pretty much at the same time. They don't grow super tall. They kind of top out at a certain height, but it's never over 3 feet or so. That's pretty max because they really start to swoop down with just all of the fruit that's on it, but they produce all of their fruit pretty much at the same time. A semi-determinate tomato stays a certain size, but it continues to produce fruit like an indeterminate does, so it's producing fruit throughout the entire span of its growing season. And then an indeterminate tomato is a just amazing plant that can get super massive, and it continues to produce fruit throughout the entire growing season. So usually what a lot of people do is use determinate tomatoes for preserving, because then you have the same variety of a bunch of tomatoes at the same time, so you can harvest them all at the same time and use that for preserving and just different things like that. Sauces, soups, salsa, whatever.
Do they all get the same disease?
No. Well, tomatoes are prone to different types. Not some are hybrid versions, so they're not heirlooms, so they've been bred to not get certain diseases. But some diseases that are common in tomatoes are leaf curl, which is usually just when they're exposed to a lot of wind and sun at the same time, and they're not being adequately watered. So I did have one plant that did that last year. So what it does is its leaves literally curl up around the long side. So their leaves are kind of long shaped, kind of like your hand, and the sides of that leaf just curled in. And if you can't get it to stop, it will kill the plant. That's one disease that I've had.
And you're trying to stop it by giving it water?
You want to, in the very beginning, you want to always keep a very consistent watering schedule with tomatoes. They still will grow, but tomatoes do better when you are consistent watering. So the same amount of water for the same amount of time at the same time every day if you can. So that really helps eliminate the chances of them getting too hot and too much wind because they still have water. So sometimes they can overcome that. So I am assuming it was the wind and the sun because it was on the west side of my garden and it was just on that side of the heat, and the ground underneath my raised bed is gravel, so I don't know, but it was just one plant on that side. So, and there were similar varieties that were growing on that side, and none of the other ones had it. So that's one thing they can get. What's another thing? I'm not too familiar. That's one thing I dealt with. Tomato hornworms are a pest to tomatoes. They are green. They blend in. You will not see them unless you are watching your plant very closely. So you want to always make sure you're trimming your plants and making sure that you're watching and keeping an eye out for tomato hornworms because they will annihilate your plant. I know because I had some last year. I kept them at bay pretty well, but it's still something like you have to stay on top of it. There's some people that go out at night and use a black light because they glow and you can find them in the dark. So that's one way that's super easy to find them. Being just diligent about checking your plants, undersides of leaves. You will see when there's one somewhere because their poop is everywhere. Like, and as they get bigger, they just have more passing. So you'll find them. I do have video of when I found them last year. They're disgusting looking. They're literally, when you smush them, they're just like juice because that's all they're eating is just the tomatoes.
But to treat it, like you wouldn't use
I don't
an
want to
insecticide.
spray. To stay organic, I don't want to spray my plants. So I just have to pick them off. You just kind of have to like figure out what your size of space is and like how on top of it you can stay. I was pretty much in my garden every day. So like I checked and just made sure that I wasn't missing any. And if I did, you can see if you
keep
have...
looking out there. Is your garden out there?
My garden is out there. I'm going to miss this view because I can see my garden from my kitchen window. But it is it's very empty right now. Flashback to last like August. It was very full and very pretty. Lush and green and all the good things. There is garlic growing. I can see the garlic. It is growing like crazy. Yes, those are the only two that I have dealt with. Now, I think tomatoes can get blight also. And then if there's other diseases, I'll list them. I'm not familiar with them because that's the only thing that I have dealt with so far with tomatoes. Consistent watering. Just staying on top of your plants, making sure that they're getting the right nutrition. I used Garden Tone from Espoma for my fertilizer, and then I also had compost in my garden beds for fertilizer. You want to make sure you're fertilizing your tomatoes. They take a lot of nutrition, and they take up a lot of space, especially if you have indeterminate sized tomatoes. And then, which brings me back into trimming tomatoes. So you don't want to trim determinate tomatoes because they only produce a certain amount of fruit. Now, if you're wanting to have more larger sized fruit on your determinate plants, you can trim slightly, like taking the sucker shoots off, but all of those shoots produce fruit. They will flower and they'll produce fruit. So I usually stay away from trimming my determinate tomato plants. Indeterminate tomato plants, I do trim because if you don't, they just grow everywhere. It's incredible. I like take all the sucker shoots out, and it just produces a lot more fruit because you have these giant stems that are growing out and like producing your main stem of fruit, especially like large tomato variety plants that are indeterminate, like a beefsteak or something like that. To be able to form those large fruit, you need to trim them so they can like put that energy into those fruit, or they just won't get ready in time. So you want to just make sure you have a good amount of growing season for large tomato plants, because to get to that big size tomato, it takes a lot of time. They like are green forever, it seems. But anyways, so I'm going to go through some of the varieties that I have this year. This one is Cherry Falls, which is a really cool variety because it is more like a container variety. It'll cascade kind of over the sides. I had it in my green stock last year. I really loved it. My cousin actually made us salsa from these tomatoes when she was house sitting for us. It was delicious. But these are great container plants, hanging baskets, anything that they can really like cascade over the side. I really like those. They have more of a tomato flavor. When they are fully ripe, they're more of a just regular tomato flavor. These are new. This is an indeterminate type. This is a sweetie cherry tomato. It's known, so it says on the back, known for its hearty flavor and early harvest. Sweetie produces large numbers of 3/4 to 1 inch cherry tomatoes with grape-like clusters. And these are, like I said, indeterminate. So I'll be staking these. And that's another thing I wanted to share too. Staking tomatoes, I used like cattle panels in my raised beds, and then I just tied them to that. And then I actually also used bamboo stakes because they were so big that like I planted them zigzag, and some of the plant just like I couldn't get it to tie to that. So one thing I think I will do is if I do plant tomatoes against cattle panel, I'm not going to plant anything on the other side that needs to be tied to the cattle panel, because that way the tomatoes can go through and I can train them through the cattle panel, and I don't have to worry about whatever's on the other side. So that's just a note for myself to not put, I had peppers on the other side and I had to trim everything off that grew on the other side because it couldn't shade the peppers, because the peppers needed sunlight too. This was my favorite from last year. This is the Sun Gold cherry tomato. This is also an indeterminate kind. These were so pretty when they started ripening. They had large, just like, what's the word? Sprigs of tomatoes, and as they were ripening, you had the different like shades of yellow and oranges and reds, and it was just really, really pretty. Not red. Green, yellow, orange is what the colors were into. Super delicious. My daughter loved them. She ate those every time we were in the garden. And then beefsteak I grew last year as well. This was a huge tomato. I had one that was fully the size of my hand. And they're really meaty, which make great sandwiches. I do tomato sandwiches. So I take a piece of bread, put mayonnaise on it, and a slice of tomato, and then put sugar on top of it. Some people put salt on top of it, and then some people put fresh made bacon on top of that too. Really good, highly recommend, especially if you are a tomato fan. But this one is just a huge, it's very tomato flavor, it's very rich tomato flavor. Yeah, just really meaty tomatoes, not a lot of the seeds and like gushy stuff that's inside of a tomato, even though that stuff is good for you. But this is a yellow variety, an indeterminate type. It's called Golden Jubilee. This is new for me this year. It says mild, low acid flavor makes excellent tomato juice, sauce, and salsa. Small seed cavities mean fewer seeds and more solid, meaty slices, perfect for sandwiches and slices. Expect high yields of 3-inch delights. So I'm really excited to try that one. And Red Pride I grew last year. These are more like a sauce tomato, so I'll be growing those again for sauces. This is a determinate type, so this one only got to a certain size, and then it just produced all of its fruit. But like I said, if you have a determinate type of tomato plant and you want larger fruit on it, you can trim it so it kind of concentrates energy to make larger fruit, not just a whole bunch of fruit. Just preference. And then I had the Garden Gem. I'm not sure. I didn't love these, but then other people say that they love them. So I'm not sure if I just like didn't get a good tomato, if they just didn't, I'm not sure. They just didn't do well.
Didn't love them like taste-wise?
Taste-wise. I don't know why. I didn't really love them. So I'm going to grow them again. And so like this year I'm going to have a lot of varieties, and I really want to
grow them for the pigs or what?
If I don't love them, then maybe. But yeah, so I'm gonna grow these again, just put them side by side with some of the other varieties that I got. But this was I think it was Indeterminate because I put it on the end of my no, this is a semi-determinate, so it'll only get to a certain size but still continue to produce fruit. And then I also have the Garden Treasure, which is kind of like a beefsteak variety. It's huge, really good flavor. I did like these a lot. These were delicious. I'm going to grow those again. And then we did an experiment last year. So we put wood chips in my old raised bed area, and they had started breaking down. And we kind of wanted to see if we could plant something in the wood chips and see if it would grow. And they weren't broken down enough, and I got starts for pineapple tomatoes, like such. But they didn't do anything. They just like grew tall and didn't really do anything else. But I am excited to try these. It says these luscious tomatoes ripen to yellow, orange, accented with hints of red that go through the solid, meaty interior of the fruit. Large beefsteak type fruits don't have a lot of seeds but are filled with complex, low acid tomato flavor with a hint of fruitiness that's just the right balance of sweet and tangy. I always think like I just want to meet the people that come up with the descriptions for some of this stuff because they just really know how to do it. So I'm excited for that. That is also an indeterminate type, so it needs to be staked. You can also get tomato cages. Now, I say that, and the tomato cages that you buy in the store, those round things that have the spikes that go into the ground, for indeterminate tomatoes, they are not big enough. You can use them for pepper plants. They're really great for pepper plants. But they are actually not made to hold an indeterminate tomato. Determinate tomato plants, I think they could hold them, but they're not big enough to actually hold an indeterminate size tomato plant. So just to know, like when you go and you buy an indeterminate tomato, you need to have a pretty large staking system to hold the tomato plants up because they just get huge and they need to be staked. All right, this one is called Artesian Bumble Bee Blend. So it's a beautiful blend of 3 distinctly striped bumblebee varieties with bright colors and flavors. These are a gourmet to the eye and palate. Really excited to grow these. They look awesome. Each tomato is striped, no two are alike, and mixed together they are stunning. Juicy right off the vine or in a salad. Big plants need to have support, produce big yields throughout the season, and they're crack resistant. Oh, that is something that tomatoes are prone to, is cracking. So when they get too much water, they can crack. So like you really have to watch your weather too. If you have a lot of rain coming, you can kind of like eliminate watering maybe those couple days that you have a lot of rain coming, because it just eliminates too much juice being inside of the tomato at one time, causing cracking in the tomato, like shoulders up where the stem attaches to the tomato. So that's another thing too, and having a consistent schedule of water really helps eliminate that, because you're not watering a lot and then watering not a lot or anything like that. So just stay consistent on water and watch your forecast too. Like be aware of how much rain you're going to be getting or whatever. So really excited for those. And then Ace 55 is a determinate type that I grew last year. This is also more of a canning tomato, so for sauces and just different things like that. And we're growing those again. I really liked the flavor of the Italian Romas that I grew, so I'm going to do those again. They were delicious. They just had a really good flavor. I'll be doing a lot of sauces for this variety this year, and like my own paste and just different stuff. Last year was kind of just an experiment to see like how much I need to grow for this year. So yeah, I'm really excited. These are also just good fresh. Like you don't have to use like a sauce tomato just for sauce or whatever. You can use it for eating fresh on salads, just different stuff. I'm really excited for this one. This is a semi-determinate type. It's called Indigo Rose. Really cool looking tomato. Excited to try this one. So it says dark, delicious, and highly nutritious. Indigo Rose was bred for its anthocyanin, I think is what you say that, content, but you will love growing it for its beauty and flavor. So that anthocyanins, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, is antioxidants. It says its 5-foot vines require support and produce plentiful 2-ounce fruits in clusters of 6 to 8. Gorgeous purple-brown tomatoes have a balanced sweet and acidic flavor. For best flavor, allow fruit to fully ripen on the vine. It's an open pollinated variety and highly resistant to early blight and powdery mildew. So yeah, I guess powdery mildew would be another one that tomatoes can get if there's not enough wind flow. So that brings me back to how important it is to trim your tomato plants so that a lot of airflow can get inside of the plant and be moving through. Because if you have humidity like we do here, you need to make sure that you're allowing airflow through your tomato plants to eliminate powdery mildew. And then this is not a tomato, but it's a ground cherry. And I have never grown ground cherries, so I'm really excited. But this is called Aunt Molly's ground cherry. Is a Polish heirloom variety, has unusually fine flavor, very sweet with a nice hint of tartness. Excellent choice for pies and preserves. So I read a post about making ground cherry pie. And so I really want to try that and just see if I like it. But you can tell when they're ready when the husk drops to the ground, hence ground cherries. So you don't really have to guess when they're ready. But yeah, that's the varieties that I'm going to try this year. There's so many out there. There's a lot of varieties that I wanted to get, but I was like, to be honest with myself, like I really want to preserve a lot of tomatoes, and so I did get a lot of varieties that were more just for preserving. I got some yellow ones and the sun golds that I loved. I really like cherry tomatoes. They're really good snack size, and I love that my daughter loves tomatoes so much as I do. So that is what I'm growing this year. I'll actually be starting those seeds this week. I'm not sure if I'll do a video on seed starting since I've been doing a lot of those lately. I just wanted to share about tomatoes and just some like helpful tips. There are some things that I use to help tie tomatoes. There is like a plant tape that you can get. It's just like on a big roll of, I don't know, it's like this big around, and it's called plant tape, and it's not actually tape, it's just like plastic string kind of stuff, but it's kind of wide, so it's like about this wide, and you can rip it off and use it to tie your plants. You can also buy the like felt covered wire, or not felt, it's like squishy green sponge like material that's around like bendable wire, and you can cut it into sections that you want it to. That's really good because you don't really want to use something that if the tomato plant's moving around, it'll like dig into the tomato plant, because that'll just hinder growth and stuff like that. I also used, you can use string if you want to, just be aware of it like cutting into your tomato plants. There's a lot of other options out there. Having a good tomato cage, like I know Gardener's Supply has some really good ones that are really big, and you plant your tomato plant in the middle, and then you just train its growth to go onto like the different tiers of growth on them. There's a lot of different ways to tie tomatoes. There's the Florida weave way. There's actually just tying it to like panels. There's cages. Yeah, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of different ways. You just have to kind of figure out like what does your space allow you to grow. So just be mindful. Indeterminate types get massive, so just be prepared for that. And you can actually train them. I trained my sun gold cherry tomato to grow over the top of my cattle panel, and so like the fruits just kind of dangled down. That was pretty cool. I trained one of the main stalks to go that way. The rest of them I just tied to my cattle panels. So yeah, that's kind of just what I learned about tomatoes. Just make sure you're fertilizing them. There's a lot of instructions on the back of like the garden tone fertilizer. You can actually get tomato tone too, that's specific from Espoma. but the garden tone is usually what I stick with. I've never actually planted tomatoes with eggs in the hole. Some people do that. I've never done it, so I can't tell you if it's actually a thing that works or not, but I also use biotone when I first plant the tomato plants. And just compost, good soil, watering, lots of sunlight. They need a lot of sunlight. However, if you are in a super hot area, you might want to look into having shade cloth or something like that, because tomatoes can actually overheat to the point where they will not flower. So just be aware, like if you're in consistent 90-degree weather, like for weeks on ends or up into like 100-degree weather, you have to be aware of tomatoes actually getting too hot to the point where they won't fruit. So just be aware of that. And for us here, like we might touch 90s for a couple days sometimes during the summer, but never that we have like every single day in the 90s or 100 or anything like that. So we don't really worry about that. But yeah, I hope this was helpful, and for all you tomato lovers out there, I hope you have some pretty amazing varieties that you're growing, and share what you're growing. I always love to hear you guys' favorites and just try new seeds every year. And yeah, so I'm gonna have a lot of tomato plants. We are anxiously waiting for weather to give us an opportunity to put my garden in over on our new property, so that can sit and be ready for when I'm ready to plant in May. So yeah, we are just anxiously waiting for that kind of steps. But until then, I will be starting a whole bunch of seeds. I hope you guys have a blessed day, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.